Hey internet friends, let me show you a common mistake. A mistake a moose makes. Don't be a moose, don't make this mistake. And it's to do with EQ, hence the title of the video, quite naturally. What we really want this to look like is the pink. And it's after EQ, it looks like the blue. After EQ, it looks like the blue. That's the rhyme to remember what you're looking at on screen. So if we EQ this sub-bass above 55 Hz, let's not click that. If we EQ the pink 55 Hz sine wave, we get the blue clips below. After EQ, it looks like the blue. After EQ, it looks like the blue. After EQ, it looks like the blue. Anyway, you can see there's a bit of just what's going on. Look at this one, for example. That's not ideal. We've taken this 55 Hz sine wave, applied this EQ curve, and yet it's faded in at the front for a start, and it's only half the problem. It's faded in a way that's not ideal. We didn't even want any of that. We just wanted to EQ the thing, and then it sort of goes up and down a bit. There's a bit of a wobble going on, and then look at the end. It sort of goes up and then down, and it's this massive tail. And in fact, this is actually even a different frequency. So this is 55 Hz, yet the tail here is 60 Hz. It's a disaster. It's a complete disaster. Delete it. Just give up. Go home. You've become a moose. You've made a moose mistake. That's not good. And then you're probably very confused at this stage. You're thinking, well, multiplier, how can a simple 55 Hz sine wave, a clean 55 Hz sine wave, how can this sine wave through this EQ curve give you this blue clip with this chaos going on? Sort of wobbling about, and there's a different frequency at the end, and this big tail. That's not ideal. I didn't want that at all. All I did was EQ, and yet there's this tail. Oh no, disaster. Don't worry. I shall explain all of this in a moment or so. Before I show that though, let me explain these other two guys. The middle blue is the pink clip after EQ, but this time the Ableton EQ8 EQ in 4 times steepness. And then the blue clip below is the pink clip after EQ, but with this fab filter, even steeper low pass filter, 96 dB steepness, a natural thing to do for lots of producers. And as you can see, there's varying degrees of problem here. One of them's a complete disaster, sort of end of the world apocalypse type disaster. One of them's not quite as big of a disaster, but still not ideal, not what we want. And one of them's in between. But all of these are a very natural thought process. Let me explain. Oh, and it's worth noting, just to make this very, very clear, this thought process is a mistake, a mistake, well, because of what happens, all these errors, bad. So it's a natural thought process, you've probably been through it yourself, and yet it creates this mistake. Let me show you. The thought process is we have a 55 Hz sine wave, let's make it big. There's a bit of a click at the beginning and the end, but that's not the issue, as I'll prove to you soon, so ignore the clicks at the beginning and the end. This is a 55 Hz sine wave, that's all it is. And so, here's what people think. They think, well, I mean, yes, it's a sub-bass. Yes, I can see it's a 55 Hz sine wave. It's a low frequency and there's not much going on, but let's be doubly sure. Let's make sure there's definitely no high frequencies. I mean, what's the harm? I mean, if we do an EQ and there's no high frequencies, well, I mean, have we really lost anything? So we have a 55 Hz sine wave. Let's cut the highs above, say, 60 Hz. That's the natural thought process. We have a 50, slow down multiplier. Words. If we have a 55 Hz sine wave, if we therefore cut everything above 60 Hz, I mean, what can go wrong? What can possibly go wrong? We've chosen a steep high cut or low pass, same thing. High cut is the same as a low pass, just different words for the same thing. We've chosen, say, the steepest low pass filter because, say, why not? Let's make sure there's definitely no high frequencies. That's the thought process. And if we cut everything, say, above 60 Hz and we have a 55 Hz sine wave, well, it should be fine. Worst case scenario, I mean, it'll surely stay the same. Right? I mean, look at the curve. There's a curve, and that curve surely must mean something, right? That's surely the representation of how the frequencies are changed in some way. I know it's a curve, don't worry, so it's not actually cutting at 60 Hz, but it's rolling off around 60 Hz. But either way, it's a natural thought process. Well, I mean, what can possibly go wrong? If I have a 55 Hz sine wave, a clean, this pink guy up here, if I have a clean, flat 55 Hz sine wave, if I apply an EQ curve like this, well, I mean, what's it going to do? You might even think, look at this. So we can look at where the 55 hertz is. It says minus 1.2. So maybe worst case scenario, it brings down the level of this sub bass 1.2 dB, but that doesn't concern us. If it just turns the whole thing down 1.2 dB, we go, fine, it's still the same, just turn down 1.2 dB. Not a problem, but we definitely don't have any high frequencies now. Excellent. That's your thought process. Maybe. Let's take this even further though, making the most extreme mistake. Maybe you're thinking, that's cool, I've done some low passing, good on me, good job. But oh, wait a minute, don't I have that plugin with an even steeper, I've clicked like a maniac. Don't I have that plugin with an even steeper high cut, aka low pass filter? Oh yes I do, and that is this, it's an Alloy 2, that rhymes as well. I'm an excellent rhymer, rhyming's one of my many skills. So maybe you're thinking, oh yes, I remember that brick wall, super steep thing in Alloy 2, that must do an even better job. That'll make 100% sure that I don't have any high frequencies, and of course again, what could possibly go wrong? So you grab isotope Alloy 2, turn off dynamics, we don't need that. We're doing EQ. So you grab EQ and then you grab this low pass brick wall, the steepest of all the possible filters. As you can see, super steep. Look how steep that filter is. Look how steep it is, super steep. This must be great at cutting things. Surely, maybe? Anyway, it's not, but you can see how people might think this is. So again, let's do the same thought process. We have a 55 hertz sine wave, so let's cut everything above, say, 60 hertz. Again, 60 hertz. And in this case, well, it even looks more like an actual cut. We're not just rolling off the frequency steeply, it looks like we're cutting things, literally just cutting the frequencies out above, say, 60 hertz. So surely that's fine for our 55 hertz sub bass, our sine wave. However, let's bounce this to audio and let me show you the issue. I mean, you've seen the issue, but let me bounce this to audio. In fact, there's two issues here. Let me explain. Focus multiplier. Focus. Okay, so the first issue is you might not see the issue. Let me explain. So if we don't bounce this to audio, if we simply leave this sub bass as it is with the plugin on, doing its thing, but not bounce to audio, we might think it's fine. We might think we've done our job, we've done our mixing. Boom, I'm a producer. I haven't made a mistake. I'm a lion. Lions don't make mistakes. And everything's fine. Everything's fine in the world. Let me export my track, upload it to YouTube. Boom, I'm a mega music star. But now there's a problem here. There's a problem we haven't seen. Whilst yes, if we listen critically, we're soloing this sub. Oh, I've turned it off by accident. If we listen critically, we can hear there's a tail at the end once the pink clip stops, and a bit of a wobble at the front, and the frequency going up at the end. But anyway, it's quite easy to miss that. Yes, if you're soloing it and you have headphones on and you're listening to these things and you remember what the sub bass sounds like and got a bit of a trained ear, yes, you can yes, you can hear this mistake. It's easy to miss this though, especially if it's more subtle. This is important. If the mistake is extreme, we're likely to catch it. A big tail like this, we're likely to catch. We're likely to catch and correct. But if the mistake is small, like in the case of this guy or this guy, well, it's easy to miss. It's easy to miss, but it's still a mistake. Most people wouldn't hear that tail, and almost everybody wouldn't hear that tail. And yet it's a mistake, and yet it will cause problems. Most of the time, you probably won't get a big tail like that. It's only when you use the steepest curves that you get these big tails and big problems at the front. Most people probably won't use this crazy steep curve. They're more likely to use, say, Fab Filter or EQ8. But I mean, even in the case of Fab Filter, that's a likely thing to happen. It's a natural thought process. Apply a low-pass filter and see how steep it goes. If you don't realize the steep curves cause problems, the natural thing to do is to try the steepest curve possible, surely. But remember this, the steeper the curve, the more problems you'll have. The steeper the curve, the more problems you'll have. Anyway, that's why we bounced to audio. That's a pigeon just flew past my window. Maniac! Sorry, internet, just got distracted by a pigeon. It's quite intimidating, actually, when it flaps its wings right by the window. I mean, it's separated from me via glass, but it's still 3 or 4 foot away from my head. Anyway, this is why we bounce to audio, to check for these sorts of things. It's one of the reasons, it's a reason why we bounce to audio. So let me grab tuner, not tuner like the fish, but tuner, the Ableton device that shows you pitch information. So we've soloed Alloy 2, the big crazy one. There you go. Let's zoom out a bit more, like so. See how the main pitch of the sub bass here is at one pitch, but then at the end, it goes up in pitch. If you look at this in a spectrum analyzer, you'll see that that second pitch is that 60 Hertz, which again, you could prove for yourself by, say, changing that cutoff frequency. If you change it from, say, 60 to 65, then the second pitch in tuner would be a different note. And that's something, do this for yourself as a test. Anyway, furthermore, in addition, you may be thinking now, multiplier, that's all great and cool and stuff, but I mean, really, is that really a problem? I mean, I can see how that might be a problem. Let's delete that. That's a bit dramatic. Anyway, multiplier, I can see why big tails, let's undo that so I can use it as a reference. Multiplier, I can see why that would cause a problem. That's not what we want. We wanted a clean, flat sine wave. But what about this? Why is that a problem? That's just the note being a bit longer. That's not a big deal. I can live with that. Especially, that's not even much longer at all. Multiplier, you're being over dramatic. You're being what's the big two? That's just multiplier. That's just not an issue. Get on with your life. A bit of a tail on a sub bass. That's fine. That's fine. No, it's not. All of this extra stuff is an issue. It's an issue because it's low frequency information that's likely to overlap with other low frequency information, causing problems, causing rumbling, causing phasing. It'd be common, for example, to have a kick on 9.3. That one's fine, just for the sake of visuals, and then I'll show you an audible example of this low frequency phasing in a sec. In your project, you might have something like this, a kick, this guy here, a kick where the sub bass finishes. Now, if we purely have the sub bass un-EQ'd, then that's fine. The sub bass does a thing, and then the sub bass finishes, and then the kick starts, and that's cool. They're not interacting with each other. They're not layered. However, if we were to EQ the sub bass, there would be these tails overlapping with the kick. That's why these tails are a problem. These tails might overlap with some other low frequency information, usually a kick or maybe a different sub bass note. As I'll show you in a few moments' time, layering low frequencies causes problems. This just is bad. Don't want this. We don't want that happening when the kick's happening. And now, again, here's another important point. Even if, so let's take a very specific example. That's clearly a bunch of chaos alloy 2. So let's look at the fab filter example. Let's say this is the case. Let's say we've got a sub bass. Let's even delete that for simplicity visually. Let's say this is the case. We have the blue sub bass and the pink. Let's change that to yellow. Best case scenario, it doesn't really cause a problem. But I mean, sometimes when you layer low frequencies, you don't really get any issues. It just sort of fits around each other and that's fine. So best case scenario, the sub bass low end sort of doesn't get in the way of the kick. They layer over each other in a way that's not a problem, and that's fine. Doesn't really cause a big issue. Yes, use up more headroom than if there wasn't a sub bass there, but best case scenario, it sounds fine. But even in the best case scenario, it's just not ideal. I mean, I've already mentioned one reason. It's taking up headroom. This plus this takes up more space in the track than just this. And importantly, this is the important point, this bit at this moment in time isn't contributing anything useful to the sub bass. It's not helping. Best case scenario, it's getting in the way in a way that's not too bad. But even in that best case scenario, it's just not adding anything to the sub bass. At this moment in time, when the kick's happening, we want the kick to be contributing low-end information. When the kick's happening, it's the kick that we want to do all the work. We want to get all the low-frequency information from the kick. Think of it this way, at every moment in time, whether it's here or here or here or here, anywhere at all, at every moment in time, you want to make a conscious decision, what's contributing information here? What's the important thing here? What's the story we want to tell? What's the musical idea we want to convey? And when the kick's happening, the kick's contributing low end. That's it. Before the kick, it's the sub bass that's contributing low end information. But when the kick's happening, the kick's doing the work. Anything else is just getting in the way. As I say, sometimes it's getting in a way that's not too bad, but it's still getting in the way. As I say, that's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, this completely ruins things, as I'll show you in a few moments. I keep saying that, but don't worry, I will. Worst case scenario, this completely ruins the kick, because whenever you layer low frequencies, it's just rolling the dice. Low frequencies interact with each other, and so this low frequency information from the sub bass is going to interact with the kick. Hopefully it's fine, but more often than not, it's going to make the kick messy and rumbly and phasey. Layering low frequencies creates a messy low end, a rumbly low end, a messy, unfocused, undesirable low end sound. Let me undo so I can show you again visually. And so that's why EQing a sub bass is such a big problem, sometimes anyway. If it creates a tail like this, and especially if you use a steep curve, again, this is important, the steeper the curve, the bigger the mistake. So the steepest curve caused the biggest mistake. The medium steepness curve created a medium-sized mistake, definitely a mistake. And then the least steep curve, but still steep, created a smaller mistake still. If we don't bounce to audio, it's so easy to miss these things. So even if you know about the idea that we shouldn't layer low frequencies, if you don't bounce to audio, it's easy to miss. If I was to grab, say, in fact, if I was to bet money, I would say that if I took this 55 Hz sine wave and applied a steep, steep 60 Hz low pass filter, if I was to put this in my track just as it is, a sine wave of 55 Hz with a low pass filter steep on there like that, most people probably wouldn't bounce to audio. I reckon 99% of you wouldn't bounce this to audio because you don't bounce, I suppose most people don't bounce everything to audio. Some people do, so let's say 98%, maybe 1 in 50 people, hence 98%, bounce everything to audio just as a routine, as a workflow for reasons like this, but most people don't. They leave. I mean, if you had a plug-in effect, you might bounce that to audio, but just an EQ like this, that's fine. Don't bounce it to audio, no worries. A lot of people, therefore, will have this overlap here that they don't realize, because this EQ curve, remember, creates an overlap here, a small one, but an overlap nonetheless that'll cause problems with the kick. Oh, I should have probably scripted this video more. Anyway, so there's 2 more points I want to mention before I show you how layering can be an issue. I did mention earlier that I'd explained that it's not the click at the end of this sub bass that causes this tail. This sub bass technically has a bit of a, let's turn off, we'll delete the EQ. If you listen carefully, and especially on headphones, you hear a bit of a click at the beginning and the end of this sub bass. It's not the click that causes these issues at the front and end of the EQ'd versions. Now, we could remove the click by increasing the fade. So the front, so this is a fade, a volume fade. If we fade in the front, it should be fine. At the front, we don't have to fade as much as at the end. At the end, you need to fade it in a bit more, say something like that. If we fade the front and the end like so, literally a volume fade at the front and the end, that completely removes the clicks. So now on a more technical level, it's a much cleaner sine wave. Strictly speaking, a click has high frequencies in, so it's at the front and the end, there were other frequencies involved, but with no click, it's just a sine wave. That doesn't solve this issue I've been describing. In fact, let me prove that to you, because some people might not believe me. Actually, probably most people will believe me, but let's do it for the sake of completeness, and this is a long video anyway by now. So, isotope alloy 2, the most extreme example, equalizer, grab a brick wall, super steep low pass filter, set it at 60 Hertz, and then let's bounce this to audio. Bingo, bango, bongo. Let's make sure that no one thinks the spectrum does anything in the bouncing process. So freeze, flatten, and there you go, there's the tail. Now it's actually a slightly, that's the extent of the slightly, it's a slightly less extreme mistake. That click caused about 2% of the issue, as I can confirm to you by, maybe you can see visually, it's a slightly, maybe if I zoom out a bit and make it bigger, that's what she said. It's a slightly smaller sort of increase in level right at the end, and the front wobble's slightly less extreme. It's still an extreme wobble, but as you can see, it's still a mistake. It's a mistake a moose would make. There's a tail hanging over the end, and the front's all crazy, and the frequency still goes up and down like a madman. So it's not the click that causes all these issues. Summarizing the last minute, it's not the click that causes these issues. The post ring. Oh, this is called post ring, by the way. Post ring. Post ring on a technical level. It's not the click that causes post ring or that contributes a small amount, and equivalently with the fades at the front. So that's not the issue, it's the steepness of the curve. EQ plays with time. EQ doesn't turn frequencies up and down. That's not really what it's doing. It's that curve you see is a representation of what it's doing. Yes, it changes the balance of frequencies, but to do that, it has to do some other things too that I won't dive into, but I'm sure you can Google audio, computer science, signal theory, DSP stuff if you're curious as to how and why that works like it does, and why EQ causes all this nonsense, but it's not relevant for most people, the why it causes this chaos. Oh yes, I was going to show you. Let me show you visually on a technical level, low frequencies interacting. So here we have two sine wave sources. The top is a 55 Hz sine wave, I've clicked play before I meant to. A clean, so the top example, a clean, let's make all this bigger. That's what she said. Oof, like so. So on the top we have a clean 55 Hz sine wave, literally just a 55 Hz sine wave, playing for 30 seconds, a single frequency at a single pitch, single frequency. And below we have a similarly clean sine wave, but this time going from 30 Hz to 120 Hz. So the one below again, a sine wave, a low frequency sine wave, but this time sweeping from 30 Hz to 120 Hz. Here's the middle bit. See the pitch increasing. So see it rising. It's a single frequency sweeping up from 30 Hz to 120 Hz. Cool. So notice that first of all, two things. One thing actually. Yeah, one thing. So individually, they're clean sine waves with a flat dynamic, a flat amplitude, flat. You can see that visually. I'm showing you a visual here. But when we combine them, they interact and then they cancel out and sort of, well, let me show you. It's interesting. Look visually at the outputted waveform. So the outputted waveform will be on this third track in yellow. So track 1 plus track 2 equals track 3. Look at the visual. Oh, I can already see it's a bit jiggity jaggedy, wibbity wobbity. What? Oh, that's. Oh, and it sounds weird. Oh, look at that visual. Track 1 plus track 2 equals weird. Wibbly wobbly. It's quite aesthetically pleasing though. These are sub-frequencies, low frequencies interacting and causing wibbly wobbliness. That is the technical name, wibbly wobbliness. Let me show you again audibly because I was talking over that like a madman. First of all, see visually. I mean, you can kind of see visually already that there's whole bunches of chaos is happening. So clean sine wave flat plus clean sine wave flat equals wibbly wobbly chaos and tones and horrible. I mean, it's kind of nice to look at visually, but not good. Not good. This plus this, low frequencies layering equals bad. Let me show you audibly, hear them interacting with each other. Remember, a single frequency and a sweeping frequency, causing chaos. As you can hear, it's fine over here. But as you can hear, it's not ideal here. When the frequencies are close together, they interact and they wobble about. The correct term for this is dissonance. Actually, there's lots of correct terms. Anyway, they interact with each other and that causes problems. And this is the cleanest possible situation. This is why we don't layer kick bodies, as you get complicated interactions, which oftentimes cause messiness, rumbliness, chaos in an undesirable way. Wowzers trousers. How do we even end up here? I was talking about EQ and now we have a pretty picture of a yellow thing. That's weird. Anyway, ideas, knowledge in your brain. I'm insane. Catch on the flippity flip. I said that weird. Catch you on the flippity flip.